Well, welcome. I'm delighted that you can join us today. I'm Martha Malinsky, Executive Director of the Association of Colleges of the Sisters of St. Joseph. The Association of Colleges of the Sisters of St. Joseph draws together 7 colleges and universities across the country, all founded by the Sisters of St. Joseph. And our purpose is really to articulate and further the contemporary expression of the educational mission and legacy of the Sisters of St. Joseph. Today, I am pleased to welcome all of you to this presentation with Sister Sallie Latkovich entitled Reclaiming Our Inheritance. Today's presentation is being recorded and will be available on our website. The presentation draws from the consensus statement of the Sisters of St. Joseph. It speaks of our Ignatian-Salesian climate tempered by gentleness, peace, and joy. And we often know more about the Ignatian piece of our tradition and less so about the Salesian. And yet our charism and our spirit are rooted in both. Today, Sister Sallie will share more about the Salesian inheritance with us. Sister Sallie is a member of the Congregation of St. Joseph and holds a Doctorate of Ministry degree from the Graduate Theological Foundation in Scripture and Spirituality. Sister Sallie has worked at various colleges and universities, including St. Norbert College in DePere, Wisconsin, Barry University in Miami, Florida, and Catholic Theological Union in Chicago. Additionally, her experiences include high school teaching, parish pastoral associate, teaching in graduate programs, and um, and after serving in leadership with the Congregation of St. Joseph, Sallie has now, quote unquote, I think, retired and resides in Fort Myers, Florida, where she remains very active in presentations like this and spiritual direction and retreats. So today, I'm so grateful for her willingness to join ACSSJ colleagues and friends in presenting today. Please join me in welcoming Sister Sallie.
Thank you, Martha, and hello to you all. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you may be. Um, I'm so happy for this invitation, and I especially want to thank Martha. Planning this has been a delight, which is not always the case, but Martha has been just fine. So I'm going to share my screen for my PowerPoint. I suspect that many who are watching are also watchers of Finding Your Roots with Henry Louis Gates. And this presentation is something like finding our roots as people of the Congregation of St. Joseph. Several years ago, Marty Haugen wrote this hymn for the Feast of St. Francis de Sales. It's little known, but it's widely available on Google if you Google it. And Martha and I had a little technological glitch, so we can't play it for you, but I can sing the refrain, which is very singable, and I think you'll find it helpful in your settings as well. It goes like this. Live Jesus, live Jesus. Come, follow and abide in him. Live Jesus, live Jesus. Live Jesus for as long as you live. The verses then really illuminate our very charism. Be gentle, faithful, and giving. Be patient, kind, and forgiving. Tell everyone of the boundless love of Christ. Live Jesus, live Jesus. Come follow and abide in him. Live Jesus, live Jesus. Live Jesus for as long as you live. Be loving, caring, and humble. Raise up God's children who stumble. Tell everyone of the healing grace of Christ. Live Jesus, live Jesus. Come follow and abide in him. Live Jesus, live Jesus. Live Jesus for as long as you live. Cry out to end all division and sing of God's blessed vision. Tell everyone of the loving peace of Christ. Live Jesus, live Jesus. Come follow and abide in him. Live Jesus, live Jesus. Live Jesus for as long as you live. To this very day, the oblates of St. Francis de Sales greet each other with the words, Live Jesus. So many of you know well our consensus statement of Sisters of St. Joseph. It was composed by a study team that went to France soon after the Second Vatican Council to study our earliest documents. And having done that, they composed this consensus statement that resonates with all of us um, from the time of our founding in France in 1650 to this very day. Stimulated by the Holy Spirit of love and receptive to love's inspirations, we people of St. Joseph move always toward profound love of God and love of neighbor without distinction, from whom we do not separate ourselves, and for whom, in the following of Christ, we work in order to achieve unity of neighbor with neighbor and neighbor with God. In humility, the Spirit of the incarnate Word, in sincere charity, the manner of St. Joseph, whose name we bear, in an Ignatian-Salesian climate, that is, with an orientation toward excellence, tempered by gentleness, peace, and joy. As Martha said in the introduction, we are much more familiar with Ignatian spirituality because of the great uh, presence of Jesuits, and there are many, many schools. We are less mindful of Francis de Sales, whose really spirituality is focused on gentleness, peace, and joy. And so that was really the inspiration for this presentation. So here's just a little background Um, these are my two dear friends. Oops. Am I still sharing? There we go. Tom Murphy and Stan Dombrowski, both of whom have gone to God and who were oblates of St. Francis de Sales. They have pastored the parish community where I worship in Fort Myers, and it was they who introduced me to Francis and Jane because I experienced gentleness, peace, and joy in their presence and friendship. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we go along, the importance of friendship. So Francis lived from 1567 to 1622 in Lyon, in France. He came after Ignatius, a little more than half a century, who lived in Spain and in Italy. But the context of the church is very important to understanding Francis. You remember that Martin Luther posted his theses in 1517, and he was critical of the Catholic Church of the time based on the scriptures. Luther was an Augustinian monk, a scripture scholar, and as you might remember, the institutional church took great offense at Luther's ideas. And so the Council of Trent followed from 1545 to 1563, just before the birth of Francis. What the Council of Trent attempted to do was to provide a very legalistic structure to the church. And of course, the church of the time was in crisis. But what we know through history is that when the institutional church is in crisis, spirituality tends to flourish. We go back to the basics. Francis had keen insight and spirituality rooted solely in the love of God. So, live Jesus. He's known for two major books, Introduction to the Devout Life and Treatise on the Love of God. Both of these gave momentum to the spiritual renewal of the Catholic Church at the time of the Reformation, which focused on the structural and legal renewal of the church. So Francis went deeper. Where are we truly rooted? It wasn't only his writing or teaching or preaching, but his very person, which gave evidence of his experience of God's love. And so Francis found God's love enfleshed in human love and friendship. As I found God's love enfleshed in my oblate friends. Jane was born 5 years after Francis de Sales, and she was born into royalty. I love this picture of her and of her beautiful face. Jane was raised lovingly by her father, a man of faith, after her mother's death when she was 18 months old. As a woman, Jane married a baron, so a member of the nobility, who died in a hunting accident when Jane was 28, and they had 4 children. Jane was a woman of deep faith, and in her grief and struggle to go on, her father invited her to meet Francis de Sales, who became her spiritual director. And their relationship led them to become great and dear spiritual friends. Jane founded the Order of Visitation Sisters, and she was known as a patron of forgotten people on the margins of society, and of widows, and of parents separated from their children. It sounds very much like the founding mission of our own sisters in La Puy in France. It was the experience of the friendship shared with Francis that led them both to cultivate and nurture such God-centered friendships as central to authentic spiritual life. You might be interested in a lovely book entitled Anam Cara, which means soul friend, by John O'Donohue. I just want to add here that there are other notable spiritual friendships. John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila of the Carmelite tradition. Dominic and Catherine of Siena, Dominican tradition. Ignatius and Francis Xavier, both Jesuits. Benedict and Scholastica, Benedictines. Francis and Clare, Franciscans. And Patrick and Bridget. So the friendships here and their complementarity um, really were very creative, creating the spiritual life. So here's a quote from Francis de Sales. Love, human and divine, is the fundamental principle of life. Hungry for the substance that will sustain us, we turn to God and suckle the love that flows from the ample divine breasts. We are not only nourished on love, we are love as well. I'd just like to mention that Teresa of Avila, in her written works, also refers to um, our returning to the breast of God to be nourished. So back to the quote from Francis, our deepest nature is to be discovered in our fully realizing our capacity for love. So you might be saying, all this is well and good, but we're educational institutions. Indeed, you are. And indeed, you teach curriculum and content. But the root of all of that is to discover our deepest nature, our capacity for love. So Francis paints for us a picture of a universe of love. love that spills over from creator to creation, all of creation. So he was ahead of his time as far as our own emphasis these days on the goodness of creation, the new cosmology. Love that flows back from creature to creator in generous, joyous return. Again,
Can you
not simply,
exactly what I'm gonna?
did someone have a comment there?
Just somebody off mute.
Okay. Um, again, underscoring our own emphasis that we not simply use up the resources of creation, but treat them with respect. So Francis said that for men and women, love of God is neither pious duty nor a denial of our humanity. But to love God is to be fully human, fully alive. It is to activate our innate depths. So no matter what our subject matter, no matter what our curriculum, no matter what our syllabus, may the love of God be activated in our innate depths. And then the words that we find in our consensus statement are taken directly from Jane de Chantal. She wrote to the Visitation Sisters, my dear sisters, she might write, my dear friends, administrators, faculty in the colleges of the Sisters of St. Joseph. Our beloved congregation is a tiny kingdom of charity. If union and holy cherishing do not reign, it will soon be divided and consequently laid waste, losing the luster which all the ingenuity of human effort could never regain. Let us therefore pray that the Spirit of love, uniter of hearts, grant us this close and living union with God by our total dependence on God, and between us by a perfect cherishing and reciprocal union of heart and spirit. And thus, gentleness, peace, and joy will abide in our midst. We are formed by the company we keep. Paul Waddell, a moral theologian, writes in his book, Friendship and the Moral Life, we are formed not by laws and rules outside of us, which we seek to obey, but by our closest friends and communities who model life for us. So, for all of you who have adolescent children, I'm sure there's a concern about the group of friends that your children hang with. Hopefully, the students at our various schools are provided a community of friends, a company that take root in our very charism, of gentleness, peace, and joy. So we do have a rich history in Francis and Jane, and also in the history of our congregation of the great love of God, which love inspires us and moves us to live and work in a spirit of gentleness, peace, and joy. But we all know and experience and live in a world where this spirit is countercultural. Our world has become harsh, violent, and even hateful. And so, as we speak the truth to power, as the prophets do, as we speak and live gentleness, peace, and joy, we can face rejection and persecution. So in the first part, we just did a general overview of Francis and Jane and their spirit, who they were, what they modeled, and what they taught. Now, in this second part, I'd like to refer to maxims or memorable sayings to live by. Wendy Cotter is a sister of St. Joseph from London, Ontario, who has taught Bible at Loyola University in Chicago. 2 years ago, on the Feast of St. Joseph, Wendy shared with the community in LaGrange the background of Bishop Henri de Maupas. So most often, we cite Jean-Pierre Médaille as our founder, and Henri was the bishop. So he presided at the establishment of our congregation in 1650. And so we were celebrating 375 years as our Federation event celebrated this past summer. It was actually Henri, the bishop, who named us Daughters of St. Joseph, Sisters of St. Joseph. And Henri's devotion to St. Joseph came from one very significant source who was noted for a particular devotion to Joseph, and that was Francis de Sales. So all of the dots begin to connect. Henri de Maupas, the bishop, wrote the life of St. Francis de Sales, which was published in 1657, and he wrote it to urge Rome to begin proceedings for his canonization. The years preparing that book and the influence of Francis on Henri had only built on the influence of an earlier work. As a young priest in 1641, when Jane Frances de Chantal died, Henri was asked to give her funeral oration. And immediately following her funeral, he began to write her biography. So the bishop who was instrumental in our very foundation had a great friendship and connection with both Francis and Jane. And that connection certainly lives on in us. Undoubtedly, as Francis and Jane grew in their spiritual friendship, they together authored sayings to recommend to each of their growing communities. Francis de Sales had founded the Oblates, and Jane the Visitation Community. And like the Psalms, these sayings were not written, but spoken over and over again, so to be remembered. So I'd suggest that our own maxims of perfection may be rooted in theirs. The first publication of the Maxims of Perfection um, was done in 1979 with illustrations from one of the sisters in Erie, Pennsylvania. But many other groups have taken to writing the maxims. And I believe that one of the colleges, if I'm correct, the College of Mount St. Mary's in Los Angeles, I think, did their own publication of the maxims. So I'd like to share with you the top 10 of Francis de Sales' maxims shared with his community and shared by Jane de Chantal with her own. So notice which ones resonate with you. In your own teaching, for those of you who are teachers, you may want to refer to the maxims as an opening prayer for your classes. But I found it just amazing, the connection of the maxims, our maxims, with those of Francis de Sales, and finding that the maxims of Francis and Jane are clearly rooted in the Gospels. So Francis said, "Nothing is so strong as gentleness, nothing so gentle as real strength." So in Paul's second letter to the Corinthians, he says, "When I am weak, when I am gentle, I am strong." Again, this is countercultural. In our culture, strength is often seen as power and power over. But in our tradition, nothing is so strong as gentleness, nothing so gentle as real strength. Maybe someone comes to your mind who was a model of this maxim. Here's another one from Francis. "Never be in a hurry. Do everything quietly and in a calm spirit. Do not lose your inner peace for anything whatsoever, even if your whole world seems upset." Our world is always in a hurry. And when we're detained, we lose our patience. One of our own maxims says, "Live in peace and interior gentleness always, and show it outwardly by acting without haste or eagerness." That takes great intention. Another maxim of Francis de Sales: have patience with all things, but first of all, with yourself. And we hear again from Paul, love is patient, love is kind. I find that our intent means everything. I intend to be patient. And our intent leads us to patience. I love this one. Half an hour's meditation each day is essential, except when you're busy. Then a full hour is needed. That's almost laughable, isn't it? But from Luke, we hear, pray always, never lose heart. Francis and Jane said, be who you are and be that well. We should not seek to be anyone else except ourselves and recognize the gifts we've been given. I'll take a moment with a parenthesis here. When I was teaching in a Catholic high school, one of the biggest events that I hated every year was the choice of a homecoming queen. We had a school of about 1,350 students, and they were all gathered in the gym. And the 3 or 4 girls who were running to become homecoming queen each had to give a presentation. And then they were ushered out of the gym and they were called back in one at a time to answer one question. The question was, what is your best gift? Not one of those girls could answer. When I spoke to them one-on-one after, I said, why couldn't you answer? And they were afraid of being thought egotistical, or that people hadn't seen the gifts that they might have said. And so in our classrooms, in our learning settings, let us call forth the best in our students and affirm who they are. And we go back to the creation accounts in Genesis, that we are created in the image of God, and we are created very good. At the point in the scripture where we are told that we are created in the image of God, the only image of God that we have is of Creator. And so our fundamental identity is being called to create life. And we do that with the inheritance of Francis and Jane. Do not wish to be anything but what you are, and try to be that perfectly. true progress quietly and persistently moves along without notice. So we often can only judge progress in hindsight. The bee collects honey from flowers in such a way as to do the least damage or destruction to them. The bee leaves them whole and undamaged. Another tribute to our earth-centered ecology. And like the Hippocratic Oath, let us do no harm. A quarrel between friends, when made up, adds a new, deeper tie to friendship. This speaks to the power of reconciliation and our call to unity. It's hard, but let us always facilitate reconciliation and unity. And do not lose courage in considering your own imperfections or limitations. We are who we are by the grace of God. And so we'll take some time here in the last 15 or so minutes to reflect on what does this inheritance mean to you? How are gentleness, peace, and joy evident in your institution, in your classroom? How do you embrace and live a spirituality of gentleness, peace, and joy in your particular role and in your school? So Martha is going to call on those who raise their hand in the chat box, and you're welcome either to make a comment or ask a question or reflect with one of these questions.
Thanks, Sister Sallie. Yes, feel free to share a response in the chat box there. Happy to take questions if any of you want to raise your hand. I see a lot of clapping, a lot of applause here, Sister Sallie.
Oh, thank you. Thank you all.
Lots of applauses and love. Shannon, I see your hand raised.
Thank you. Hi, Sister Sallie. It's really good to have you with us. I'm Shannon Green from Mount St. Mary's. We've met a
Hi,
couple times at some
Shannon.
of the events. Nice to see you. And I'm so delighted you were able to do this for us because I wasn't able to attend your session at the event. I just one comment and one observation, I guess. I really appreciate you bringing in the larger church context of the historical moment. We built our pilgrimage with the starting point in Annecy so that we can explore these roots, because I do think Ignatius sometimes gets too much of the attention. And I see in my time knowing and working with the Sisters of St. Joseph, I see so much of the Salesian spirit in the spirituality and in the disposition of our sisters. And that's had a huge impact on me personally. So please keep telling this part of our story. I do. I think it's, and I'll just say my observation is, it's really, peace and gentleness is something in my own personality that I am drawn to, but the joy part is what I really see is a huge gift our sisters give to us and to our campus communities, to, just how you are in the world in very difficult times.
Yes.
So I don't know if what the secret is to that, but I think just walking alongside you and we really do want our institutions to reflect that and to be a culture, have a culture of joy, have a culture of peace and gentleness. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that sort of cultivating
No,
of
thank
joy
you.
in these times, but
Thank
yes,
you,
thank you so
Shannon.
much.
I think the key is to keep company with those who are full of gentleness, peace, and joy. Um, we can't do it alone. Uh, so, but thank you so much for your comments. Lori's hand is up. Hi,
Yes.
Lori Helfrich.
Hello, Sister Sallie. It's good to see you and to see many of you that I know. I no longer work in a CSJ specific institution, but I used to formerly work at Fompon many years ago now. But the CSJ spirituality is very much with me here. I'm in the Appalachian region in Eastern Kentucky, and I run a parish. And this idea of gentleness, peace, and joy is something that is very much a part of my ministry, running a parish, and with the people who show up at my door, those good neighbors who show up. And I think the gentleness, peace, and joy is something that very much tempers some of the rigidity of some more of the Ignatius spirituality. And so it's a good reminder that gentleness, peace, and joy, that I do get to be joyful in my work, but to approach it with gentleness, whether it's people right now who've been showing up a lot for food with all that's going on in our country, or the gentleness of sharing the Catholic faith with people wanting to become Catholic at our parish. The area I'm in is very small in Catholic numbers. So that gentleness of sharing the faith so that people can understand and know about the church and yet not have the harshness that so many of them have in their regular experience with faith here. A very oftentimes hardline condemnation from people of like, it's this way or to hell kind of thing. And so that's a beautiful gift that I get to bring here to my ministry in Eastern Kentucky.
Lori, thank you so much. And indeed, you do that. Lori was a student at Catholic Theological Union when I was there. And when I was there, I was the director of Bible study and travel. And so Lori and I spent a semester in the Middle East together. Thanks for your comments, Lori. Hello to Dan.
Thanks, Lori. Tom, you have your hand raised as well.
Yes, I do. Yeah, thanks, Martha. Thanks, Sister Sallie, for a great talk. I have a question for you and maybe for the broader group here, especially those involved in higher education at the different universities and colleges of the Sisters, the Association. And my question has to do with, like, I'll use St. Joseph's as an example here, with an increasingly more diverse student body and diverse faculty, our mission itself is not identical with the mission and charism of the sisters, though it's rooted, of course, and we try to maintain those roots. But I'm finding in conversations lately that there's, a little bit of a delicate balance. Like, how do you, we're not sisters of St. Joseph. The faculty are not sisters. We're not training sisters. You know what I mean in terms of religious diversity, students and faculty. The missions are parallel, but how do we maintain our identity with the Salesian, Ignatian spiritual tradition in an increasingly more diverse and not entirely Catholic population? Does that make sense?
I think so, Tom. Let me give it a try. Um, so I think the values of gentleness, peace, and joy, although we find them rooted in the gospel and Francis and Jane, are still important values even apart from them.
Yeah.
So, for those who value the inheritance, and um, can speak that, that's one thing. But I don't think that's necessary to live it out. I think the living out of gentleness, peace, and joy is the most important thing. So just keep at it. Keep on keeping on.
Yes, there's something universal really about the
Yeah. Yeah.
values.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Sean, I see your hand is raised as well.
Well, I just want to sort of respond to Tom. I think that's one of the beauties of Francis is that he's not really religious. He's very spiritual. So, be yourself. No, everybody else is taken. So be yourself and be that perfectly. That's good if you're Muslim or nothing, or traditional Christian, or no matter what you are. That's a good maxim to live by. And I mean, if you only lived by that one, that'd be pretty good, because first you have to find out who you are, and then what is the fullness of that, and live your life toward that fullness. So I just, that's what I think is one of the real blessings of Francis, in a way that's not true of Ignatius. It's much more human in the best sense of that, in the
Yeah.
Irenaeus sense of that. The glory of God is a person fully alive.
Thank you, Sean. You're right.
Thank you so much.
If I could also chime in from Mount St. Mary's, I think I think the world is craving gentleness, peace, and joy. And I think if we, even as educational communities, can commit ourselves, regardless of religious tradition or not, to uplifting the dignity of our students, and to Sister Sallie's example about the gifts of the students. That, I think, is our job, right? We reflect back who they are in their best self, in their dignity, in their uniqueness, and as a member of the community. So treating our students with that gentleness, peace, and joy, I think that is one of the greatest gifts. And then when we have a moment to name it, to lift it up and say, see what we're doing. That to me is a great value of this tradition. It's how we treat each other. And that is, to me, a huge contribution in today's culture, is how we treat each other.
Thank you, Shannon.
Edith, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Edith from Avila University in Kansas City. Um, well, at the end of the presentation, Sister Sallie was mentioned how we can incorporate the charism of the sisters through our daily work, but also through the curriculum somehow. So this year, I have had the opportunity to teach my first class, first year seminar class for freshmen. So it has been a really great experience. So what we have been doing in this class is try to connect the topics that we're going to teach with some maxim or reflection of the charism. So for the students, like it take us like, 2-3 minutes, read the maxim and hear the reflections, and we guided and connected to through the charism. So for some students have been very surprising about the maxims, like, oh, this is very wise, this is very profound, and that encouraged them to know more about the Catholic faith, the Catholic tradition, but at the same time being able to see in tangible ways the charism in practice. The charism is not an abstract concept, but a reality that we can live and is approachable, is close to us. So I wanted to share that because I have seen very good fruits of that during our class here.
Thank you so much, Edith. That's wonderful.
Well, I see we're almost at time here. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Sister Sallie, you have given us a gift today. Thank you for being here. And you reminded us of we are formed by the company we keep. And I think that this last hour reminds us of that. Thank you for inspiring in us the Salesian tradition and reminding us about it. And I think we'll all leave forward here more grounded in this gentleness, peace, and joy in our lives, and hopefully infusing that into our institutions and our work. So thank you so much for joining us today. So let's give her a round of applause
Thank you.
here.
Thank you all. As you could tell, it was my joy. Thank you so much.
Yes. Well, when we will share the recording with all of you, thank you again for joining us today. And thank you, Sister Sallie. Be well and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank
So long,
you.
everyone.
Bye.